Have you ever struggled to feel like it's okay to be who you really are? Have you ever felt, I wish I was more comfortable in my skin? Well, if you have, then you're going to love this. Hello, I'm Naomi Light, I'm a life coach, and I'm sharing today a conversation I had with my friend and the recently published author, Elli Johnson. 10 years ago, Elli was diagnosed with generalised anxiety disorder and postnatal depression. And she chronicles her recovery in a really humorous and beautiful way in her new book, How Not to Be Good. I read it, I laughed and I cried, and I thrust a copy under my husband's nose and says, "You've got to read it." So I hope you'll get a copy too. All of Elli's work can be found at thehippochronicles.com. And in this conversation, we talked about mental health and therapy, raising children, how to set really good boundaries, and how to be who you really are. I know you're going to love it, so I can't wait for you to hear my conversation with Elli Johnson. First question, could you tell us who you are, what you do, a little bit about your life?
Sure. The last time somebody asked me to do this, I completely forgot to mention that I was married and I had 3 children. So I'll start with that. I was like, just talking about myself for like 10 minutes and then I was like, oh, and I'm married and I've got 3 kids. I am married. I've been married for 19 years this year, a really long time. I got married at 20, which was young. And I've got 3 kids who are 2 girls, 14 and 12, and my son Ed is 9. I trained, I'm a pastor's kid. I was brought up in a very Christian household. My dad ran a big church. I trained as a theatre director. I went to university in Liverpool and worked in the theatre directing small, small rehearsed readings. My career in the theatre coincided with my tiny children stage, which was very frustrating. Because I felt like I was never doing either very well. But I loved it. I'd love to go back and work in the theatre again one day. That still holds a very big place in my heart. But about 5 years ago, I actually only stopped working in the theatre altogether about 3 years ago, but about 5 years ago, I started writing online. Writing at my blog, The Hippo Chronicles, which I never intended to do as a full-time thing, but has gradually escalated and become the thing that I do all the time. And I actually really, really love it now. I love being in charge of my own days, being able to decide when I'm going to work and when I'm not going to work. At the moment, that's just all the time, but that's just at the moment. But I love being able to, be a bit more flexible with my own timing. And also, I still do the lion's share of caring for the kids. My husband runs his own business and he's very busy as well. So it's a juggle, but one I mainly enjoy. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the book, because you have just published, just like last week was the launch.
Yeah.
So you just published your book, which I have not yet read, but I am going to read. So How Not to Be Good.
I'll read to you right now.
Yay! So tell me, what's the inspiration for the book? What has it got in it?
So I've been writing online for about 5 years, and the trigger for me to start writing online was something that happened about nearly 10 years ago. I was diagnosed with postnatal depression, and which quickly revealed itself as generalized anxiety disorder. And my life pretty much fell apart at that point as I realized that the life that I'd been building, all the things that I'd been putting in place that I thought would make my life worthwhile and matter and be successful, I realized that all those things had actually been the things that had been making me ill. So I had to rethink everything. So for about 5 years, I just sort of plodded on, and then about 5 years in, 2013, I think, I started writing online about it for myself, really, as a way of processing it and as a way of collating in one place all the things that I'd been learning. And then gradually over time, probably started putting this book together about 3 years ago, but only found the form for it last year, so it's been a long process. And the book it's called How Not to Be Good, the A to Z of anxiety, a memoir in just over 26 parts, because I like a long subheading. And it's a story. It's my story. It's the story of how my life fell apart at 30 and what had led me there and what I did about it. And I've particularly written it as an A to Z, and I don't know how easy it is to see, but the page layout is a little unusual.
Yeah, creative.
Not just lots of text, because when I was really anxious, I just couldn't read. I'd pick up a magazine and I'd look at the pictures, and I'd try and maybe manage a novel every now and again, and I was a big reader. But anxiety and depression really affects your concentration and your ability, and it can make you very exhausted, and your ability to read is really hampered. And so I wanted to write a book that each of the letters is quite short. The book itself is quite short, because I wanted someone to be able to read something that would hopefully give them some hope and maybe some ideas or some encouragement to pursue some things that might alleviate their symptoms and make them feel better. But I wanted to put it in a book that didn't feel, so often the books that you get about mental health, and I have read a lot,
yes,
are kind of tomes, and they're like, they're either very textbooky or it's a very dense memoir, which is quite hard to penetrate. And so that's the reason that the form is the way.
Yeah. Oh, so can I go back to something you said when you talked about why you wrote the book, which was you realised you had this generalised anxiety and depression, but you also realised that lots of things in your life were the things that were making you ill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that took some unpacking. That wasn't something that I realised straight away. And I think when you're first diagnosed, you just can only do things sort of piecemeal. You can only work with what you have, and then the next step, and then the next step. And but I realised that there's a quote in the book. I don't directly quote from it, but it's a guy called Dr. Cornel West, and something went around on Facebook a while back. He's an amazing American speaker, and very passionate and very enigmatic. He's brilliant, and he gave a speech, I think at the Sheffield Student Union or the Leeds Student Union. Anyway, you can Google it. It's brilliant. And he says in it, in order to fully live, we must first learn how to die, which sounds quite heavy. But what he means is we have to give up on our ideas of what a successful life should look like, what we should do with our time, who we think we should be. We are bombarded with images, with ideas, with stories, whether that's in a church environment or in a business environment or through the media or in a magazine or wherever. We are bombarded by this idea of what success is and should be, what it should look like.
Yeah.
And actually, the striving and the effort to get that can become very, very damaging. And I think for me, I had lived my life trying to, I didn't, in an earlier version of the book, I wrote about this person. It didn't end up in the book, and maybe it'll come in somewhere later, or maybe I'll write a blog about it. I wrote about this idea of the woman who is the impossible composite. So think of all of your friends. Think of, everybody has something that they're really good at. Right?
Yeah.
So I've got one friend whose house was always immaculate.
Yeah.
That is me. I had one friend who was always beautifully turned out. I had one friend who was really disciplined about her fitness. One friend who really pursued her career. One friend who was like the ultimate amazing mum, who was like always on the floor with the kids, making imaginary worlds. I had another friend who was like the social animal, who would like be out and having a great time and at all the latest theatre openings and press nights, and had always read the latest book. And, I had another friend who was really funny. And, we have these people in our lives, and we are attracted to the things in them that they are amazing at. And what I think a lot of us do is we think, well, the thing that they are brilliant at, like that one element of their character or their personality or their skill set, we should be able to harness all of those things. So I should be able to be as thin and well turned out as that person, as disciplined and exercised as that person, as focused and disciplined in my career as this person. My writing should be as good as that person. My home should be as tidy. I should be as hospitable as, etc., etc., etc. You know, whatever world you're in, you know, we see it. We're surrounded by people who are brilliant because humans are amazing. But generally, we have things that we are innately good at and things that maybe we just aren't quite our bag as much. And I think that we're brought up to believe that we should be able to do it all.
Yeah.
And we should be able to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you carry on thinking that that is possible and you pursue that relentlessly, you're going to burn out. There's no two ways around it.
Yeah.
And I think I'd been doing that with my family, with the children, with my husband, with my home, in the church, especially for me, that was always one, in my career. And I hadn't allowed there to be any give in my life. You know, I'd been like, but I can't possibly cook a ready meal for the kids, even though I've been working all day and I'm really knackered. I must cook them a nutritious, you know, meal from scratch. And we've got to have people around this weekend. They're our really good friends and we haven't seen them for 5 weeks. This is ridiculous. Why have we not seen them? And oh my goodness, but that play opens next week and I love that director and I really want to go and see that. And I still haven't read the latest Brené Brown book. And, you know, whatever it is, there's always more. And I wouldn't allow myself I wouldn't give myself permission to do the things that I needed or wanted to do. In fact, I didn't even know what I wanted, because I was so busy trying to curate this life that I thought was going to end up giving me the meaning that I craved.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I so resonate with that. And I know loads of people will really resonate with that way you've explained it. You know, this impossible composite, the perfect person that I'm striving to be. But I love the way that you actually point out that in attaching so much.
Hang on.
Are we back?
We're back.
Okay. I love the way that you point out that in attaching so much to those things, it actually even obscures for us what we really want.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I lost who I was. And I think that that's quite a common thing that can happen, I think, particularly with women when you have kids. Your attention gets so focused. And I had kids really young. Like, I had Amy when I was 24. I was married at 20, I had Amy at 24, married at 26, Ed at 29. And I worked throughout, you know, intermittently. And I think I just was on this like treadmill to keep going. You know, also society worships youth in a way, especially, well, this is the only world I know, so especially to me, in the world of theatre, it was like there was always the latest young, new, trendy director who was coming up, who by the age of 25 had done X, Y, Z. And, you know, and at the time, if I'd looked at it dispassionately, I'd have been, but they are single. They're probably funded by somebody. They don't have any children. They're not paying a mortgage. They're not trying to keep a house clean. They're not up with sick children in the night. They're not trying to make home cooked meals for staff. They're not doing any of these other things that I'm doing. But I couldn't see that at that time. I could only see I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm not as good as them. But it totally obscured who I was. And I think in my early 30s, I realised that is what had happened. And I just didn't know myself. I didn't really like myself because there was nothing there. I didn't know how to say what I thought about things because I didn't really know. I hadn't spent any time like getting to know myself, and I hadn't allowed myself to want the things that I wanted because I thought that it was maybe selfish, or that I should be caring for somebody else, or that I needed to put somebody else. I think a lot of messages that we get through the church are always about preferring another person and being sacrificial, and there's good in all of that, but if that comes at the expense of knowing who you are, then you missed it. And I had missed it, and discovering who I am over the last 10 years is so fun, because it turns out I really like the things that I like, and I really like doing the things that I like doing. And actually nobody had told me. I'd picked up messages, I'd imbibed messages through the media, through the church, through all these different, but nobody had said, but you're not allowed to be the person who you are. I just kind of I don't know, I just decided that wasn't enough, you know?
Yeah.
And actually discovering who I am and the things that I love has been such a relief, and there's so much freedom in that. Because then you get to pursue the things that you love. Once you know what they are, then you can pursue them. And you can, you know, and at the moment, for example, the last maybe 4 months, me and my husband are both chocker with work. I've been working on this book and getting it released, and my husband's business is it's only a few years old, and so he's working all the hours. And I realized I really don't like cooking dinner. Like, I really don't like cooking dinner. I resent it. And I want my kids to eat nice meals, and I want to eat nice meals, and I want to sit around the table and enjoy eating together. But the amount of mental energy that went into thinking about what we were going to eat, and did I have the shopping in, and all the rest of it, I absolutely resented it, because and it's a tiny thing, like, it's not a big deal. And so I decided, well, actually my husband decided, because he's quite good at deciding things like this, that we would try one of those, you can get, there's HelloFresh and there's Gusto and all the rest of them. And at first I had this massive, ridiculous, like, issue with it, like, oh no, we don't need that, that's ridiculous, that's too much money. Actually, it saves us money, but it, you know, initially I thought it was too much money and it's too easy and I should be able to, I mean, like, really? Actually, you're still cooking everything from scratch. You don't have to think about it. They just give you all the things that you need and you make it. And for the last 4 months, most weeks we probably had 4 meals out of a Gusto box, and I was like, okay. And once I got into it, I was like, oh great, I'm so tired. I've thought about what I'm going to cook every evening for 19 years. I'm so bored of that. But I've given myself a permission to do something that feels indulgent. It's actually not indulgent, it's just sensible. But it felt, compared to the person who I thought I used to think I should be, it felt, you know, it felt indulgent or lazy, or I don't know. So this idea of giving yourself permission, I was doing another podcast with somebody else the other day, and I was like, you're allowed to want what you want. Like, good. And as I said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's really true. Or I really like that. I'm going to remember that one. I'm allowed to want what I want. And, you know, sometimes what I want is to not see anybody and to just have some time on my own. And sometimes what I want is to see people. And both of those things are fine. And I'm allowed to want them when I want them. And that's okay. Obviously, I have responsibilities and kids, and I don't usually want to do the school run, and I've still got to do it, and all those things. I'm not saying that we should become, you know, self-indulgent and just please ourselves all the time. But I think maybe, especially as women, we don't give ourselves the time to figure out what it is we want in the first place. And so how can we pursue it? Because we don't know.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that, like the Gusto recipe box, those things are very small things, but the permissioning is huge. And I wonder if it is only through the very small ways it shows up, like, I don't really like thinking up the meals every day, that we have the opportunity to say, yeah, I'm worth saying yes to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I said this, you won't be able to hold me accountable for this, because whether I actually do it.
Okay.
I'm going to be 40 in September. And my husband was 40 last year, and he had like a whole list of things that he was going to do in his 40th year, and he wanted to go skiing, and he wanted to have this party, and he wanted this. And he was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't really know. I don't really know what I want to do. We'll have a party, but I don't, I hadn't really thought about it. And he was like, and I want to go away just with you, and I want to do this. And he had no problem writing out a list of things that he would like to do. Whether he got to do them all or not is, another question. But he had no problem making a list. And I've actually really been like, I don't really know. And then I realised what I really want to do. We love going to Anglesey. Anglesey is like our sacred place, if you like. And I love walking bits of the coastal path. Like when we go there, we'll go with the kids and we'll do just 5 or 6 miles, or maybe not even that far, just a bit of the coastal path. And I was like, in my 40th year, I want to walk the whole of the Anglesey coastal path. Kind of like a pilgrimage. I don't have to do it all at once. I could do a bit one weekend, and then I could do some of it on my own. I could take a friend. We could do some of it as a family. I don't mind. But I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to walk the Anglesey coastal path in my 40th year. And I think having made the small decisions, sometimes the small decisions are as small as I want to have a bath right now, like in the evening. So I'm going to leave that pile of laundry, and I'm going to ask the kids to clear up after dinner, and Matt's going to have to manage that one's homework, and I'm going to go and have a bath. And I think building all the little decisions has given me the confidence to say out loud, I want to do this. And I think if I walked the whole of it in one go, I think it would take like 10 days or something. Like, it's not a massive thing. And that's probably walking quite slowly. It's not a huge thing. I'm not going to do Santiago de Compostela, although I really want to do that. But I haven't gone for that. I've just gone for what I think is doable, but is also like prioritizing me and something I want to do to celebrate this slightly interesting birthday. But I don't think I would have found that had I not done little bits. And we build confidence, and we build the muscle of volition the more we exercise it. You know, I think it's like anything. I say the same thing in my book about vulnerability. Like, we build the muscle of vulnerability as we practice it. And now Brené Brown writes about that amazingly. But I think it's just the same with figuring out what we want and who we are. We only discover that as we try. Like, you have to kind of do something. It doesn't just come to you and then you just can, it's going to be perfect, and I'll just like, sometimes you just got to try. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work. Sometimes you'll think you want to do something, you get there and you go, oh no, I really didn't actually enjoy that at all. I thought I was going to, and it was awful. But we practice and we learn, and what better thing is there to learn than figuring out what it is you really want and going after it?
Yeah, and knowing that these small tiny things you're doing, although they seem insignificant, they are the muscle building, you know. Absolutely. They're like doing the reps of whatever it is you need to build the muscle.
Yeah, absolutely, completely.
Elli, can we talk about boundaries?
Oh, I love to talk about boundaries.
Because it occurred to me, me too, as you said, there was all these things in my life that I realised were the things that were making me ill, and I had to restart my life again. I thought, that must have involved quite a bit of saying no to things that really hurt you, hurt other people, mess stuff up. So how did you handle that? What would you have done anything differently?
I think initially I was quite fortunate in that the therapist who I started seeing was very, very clear with me. And I think she realised that I was at such a low point. I was so broken and exhausted. And I didn't have the confidence to make changes for myself at all at that time. I just didn't. I didn't know what would have been good. I was, and so she would, I'd talk to her about maybe a certain relationship or a certain situation that I was in, and she would say, I think you need some time out of that. I think you need to step back from that. I think you need to not see that person. There was one responsibility that I had. There was one thing that I did every week, one weeknight every week, and something that I've been doing for a long time, and I felt a sense of obligation to, and it involved people who I was close to, and she just said, I think you need to stop doing that. I think that is really bad for you. I was saying to her, every week, excuse me, hair in my mouth, every week I would drive home and I would cry all the way home, and she was like, okay, this would give you a clue. This is not good for you, Elli. And I was like, oh, as opposed to I was crying because I wasn't getting it right and I was, weak and I was all the rest of it. She was like, it's just not healthy for you to be there. But she kind of was very good because she was like, initially, you don't have the confidence to go and have the difficult conversations to say, this is why I can't come, blah, blah. Certainly I didn't anyway. I was so broken and I was so low. I had to sort of quietly slip out of things, which felt a bit weird because I like to be upfront and say what I'm doing, but I just didn't have it in me. And so she would even say to me, like, write a list now of reasons why you're not going to go to that. So that when somebody asks you, are you coming on Monday night? You can say, no, I'm not coming this week. And you can give them a reason why, and it will shut it down and you won't have to talk about it. But that is only something that you can do, maybe only something that you should do when you cannot do anything else. Like, I couldn't do anything else at the time. I had to allow myself that permission to just slip out of things without making a big song and dance about it. Later on, I had to learn to draw boundaries and I'm still, it's a constant thing. Isn't it? You have to still learn how to draw boundaries and say no to things. I have become the queen of saying no. One thing that Amanda, my therapist, said to me, usually you have to say no 3 times before somebody pays attention, especially if you're somebody who is usually says yes, or has been known as saying yes. Like if someone wanted, could you bring a pudding? Could you bring a dessert? Could you pick my kids up for me? Could you help me out with this? Would you mind XYZ? I'm going to be late. Sorry about that. Like I would happily inconvenience myself for other people's ease, for their convenience. And I realized that had to stop, because not only was that making my life harder and making it more difficult for me to just do the things that I needed to do, but actually it was eroding my confidence, because I was constantly putting everybody else ahead of me. But saying no isn't easy, especially when you've been the person to say yes. And Amanda said to me, you have to say it 3 times normally. First of all, you'll say no, and they'll go, oh, right, yeah, but, could you just, and they'll ask you again, and then you have to say no again. And then normally they'll leave it a couple of days, and then they'll come back and they'll ask you again, oh, but I know you said no, but I was just wondering, just this once, and then you have to say no again. And she said, and the other thing that you mustn't do is you mustn't apologise for saying no. Well, that's really hard, actually. I think especially in the UK, like we apologise for everything. I bump into you and I apologise. We just do it. But actually training myself to say no, and I don't mind giving a reason, but the reason can be, I don't want to.
Yes.
People are pretty surprised by that, but once you've done that a couple of times, they really get it. They get when you say no, you mean no. Some of the most difficult things were relationships that were really draining, particularly when I was really ill. So back 2009, 10, 11, there were certain friends that I had, very close friends, who were going through really hard things, and Amanda, my therapist, said to me, you just need to draw back from that, because you don't have the capacity to give them what they need. And as you draw back, somebody else will become that person. And yes, they were offended. And it was, and I've had to go back since, once I got to a point where I could explain what was going on, then I went back and I explained, and they were like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it, because they loved me and I loved them. At the time I couldn't say it, but as soon as I could, they were like, people are generally relieved